Welcome to another episode of the Honey Line. Today, and over the next few days, we're going to see about painting this entire mountain. As you can see, I've already started doing a bit of a practice paint. So we started just on this little corner here. Just so I got an idea of what basically I was going to do and how I wanted it to look. On this viewfinder, this looks a lot more reddish than it actually is, but that's fine. It's not too far off. I'll go over how I painted it in a moment. This is going to be an episode probably more documenting it rather than into the how-to. For the simple fact the videos on how to do this are already out there and explain pretty well. So if you go, and if I remember, I'll put some links in the description. The Terrain Tutors YouTube channel, look at some of his own stuff on how to paint rock faces. He goes into detail over them, and he can explain it and show it a lot better than I ever could, especially at the as at this standard. And I'm essentially using the techniques that he uses, such as essentially this is done very much using like a wash approach, and then tailoring it to what I wanted and needed. So this is the 80% finished product, so to speak. As you can see, the top is brown because that's going to have some dirt on it. It would have had some textured dirt, unfortunately. My homemade stuff had gone mouldy. Well, that's by the by. So yeah, I need to mix some new stuff up. This will have dirt up, and then we'll have trees kind of like going up this mountain side up to where the castle is, which is already built. The secondary castle has been made, the little tower, the ruined tower. We'll probably see that at the end of this episode when it all goes in. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I've deliberately done this in stages, partly for myself, so I know what I'm doing, and then secondly, just to kind of show you the thought process of how I've done it. So if we start over at this end, and I'll move this is the raw carved foam. So I went along all the mountain top and carved it into rough shapes. The best bit to kind of show that is that I've gone for kind of like quite big boulders with deep ravines in it. If ravines and crevices and all those other wonderful technical terms. So after I've carved that particular rock bit, this bit's not quite done because I need to put a tunnel mouth in. So before I shave too much off, I need to know basically what I'm working with. But after that, I coated it with a plaster, basically plaster filler glue. There was two different types of plaster that I used. I had some of this left, which is your general kind of like ready mixed filler. There was about between a fifth and a quarter of filler left in that. I mixed it with some water and watered it down. After I'd used that up, I went for the powder, all-purpose powder plaster, and mixed that into a gloop as well, and covered all the rocks, or covered the foam. This gives it as a hard shell. It makes it easier to paint because the raw foam on its own apparently doesn't take paint very well, which is understandable, I think, because it's quite it's porous, it's very spongy. So yeah, then I covered it in that, let it set. This takes quite a while, this particular process, but that blends it all in nicely. gives it a texture as well, because anything to do with rocks and stuff like that, usually the key is texture. Shape, texture, they're the main things, and then colour on top of it. And then once that had all dried and set, I started painting it grey, in a nice stone neutral grey, which this particular one is this from the range. I think it's $1.99, like a little tube. I had a look at other paints, including house paints, like emulsions. Matte emulsions would work well, but it worked out this was actually cheaper. That was $1.99, I think, for 120 ml, working it out in kind of like your averages and stuff like that, how many mil per pound, it worked out cheaper to get that than a sample tub or a small tub of grey paint. And that was from looking in the range, B&Q and maybe B&M. But yeah, your miles might vary. You might have some grey paint. Grey paint is grey paint, whatever it is, you know, make use of it. And then the next bit, so then this final piece here, on the end above the tunnel, I used a technique. I can't remember what the technique's called, but it's essentially doing a quarter in it. So using three colours. So I had the grey, which we had already on. That was the base coat. It was a very thin, watery base coat, as you can sort of see on some of these bits. The white from underneath is kind of coming through. That's deliberate. Just so the edges essentially are naturally showing as a lighter colour. But then these bits were yellow ochre, again from the range. Paint a quarter of this particular area, and then the middle bit was grey. And then after that, I went on with some burnt sienna, which gives it that reddy ironstone look. These are all very wet techniques, wet blending techniques, kind of washing them on and then going over it. And then after that, just using some standard black, went over it. And the black was really watered down as a wash. And then using some burnt umber on the tops. Again, it's really old cheap burnt umber, painting on the top areas, and just painting into some of these crevices and little gaps to give, you know, the idea of dirt, because this is going to be quite overgrown essentially. And yeah, that's basically how I did it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to paint, hopefully, the rest of this mountain up to about there. I might even paint that bit, because I can always cut it off and repaint it. I'll just make a tunnel that fits. I mean, from this viewing angle, it doesn't actually look that bad anyway. You can't necessarily see in it, so we might just leave it. So yeah, so this is the episode. This is going to be the mountainside painted. I think I said last episode we're potentially looking at a 12-part series for this one. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'd like to do, because I've already made some plans for the next project, which I'm getting quite excited about. It's going to be a little bit bigger than this, a lot more complex, and not necessarily entirely looking at the terrain aspect of it. It's going to be a lot of diorama stuff, but that's for then. This is now. So I'm going to get painting, and we'll give you some regular updates as we go along. So I suppose this is update little one. I've cheated a little bit. So I've just covered these rocks with plaster, and to kind of jump to the grey part, I've mixed the plaster with water and a little bit of grey paint. So basically made a plaster gloop coloured, which will save a little bit of time. So I thought I'd put it in, because if you are considering doing this yourself and want to save a bit of time, because that is going to take a day to dry properly before we can use it. Because bearing in mind this section down here, you will notice when you, because it's quite a wet, well, the process I choose to do it by was quite a wet paint process. The plaster does reactivate a little bit. It does come quite wet, so you do need it to be dry before painting it, otherwise it just all comes off and you end up with a mess and have to redo stuff. But yeah, little cheat, little hack I thought I'd carry on. If you'd not already thought of it yourself, add some paint to your plaster, and then you've got some grey plaster paint. I think the reason I didn't do it on the other bits, because it is something I've used before, is because I didn't have any grey paint, and I didn't want to like mix any up, because you never know how much you need, and then if you don't mix enough up, then it's, you know, if you're wanting it one uniform colour, which ideally I wanted this a uniform colour, not that it needed to be, and you forget the ratios, or you can't quite get the ratios right, you know, it doesn't match. But yeah, so that's update 1. So what's this? Update number 2. As you can see, this is all still very wet. I thought I'd just quickly show the process. So we've come in with the yellow ochre, and we've done a section there, and then we've come in with the burnt sienna and done a section there, and then while it's still wet, I'm going to use some black and hopefully blend this in, maybe with a bit of grey, and then that's the process, essentially. I suppose it's essentially kind of like a combination between washes and wet blending, in a lot of ways. But it's an effective technique, and then when that's I'll come in with a bit of brown, and that if you sort of look at the palette down there, it's not a massively precise thingy. I'm not bothered about the colours mixing and stuff like that, because that just adds to the blending. But yeah, that's the process with the mountain so far. I think it's going to look alright once we've got this entirety done. We're still waiting for this bit to fully dry. You can tell with the different colours where it's drying, so you know, like on the corners where it's lighter, it's hard, but the lighter bits are dry, whereas the darker bits are still a bit moist. So we'll probably, I'll do this bit and then wait and then do the rest of it and then work out on the floor. Welcome back. This is the black wash phase. So as you can see, it's kind of broken down some of that blockiness. Everything's merging into one more or less. I've not put the dirt layer in as of yet, but it gives an idea of kind of like different stone. Now this to me is looking like quite irony rich stone. Maybe this is why the castle was here. Maybe it was an iron mine. We don't 100% know. But before I put the dirt bit on, because this is very wet now, I'm going to leave it to dry a little bit, and then I'll go in and kind of react, like blend in the dirt, and let it go down, and then move on to the next bit. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. This bit that's already dried. As you can see around the edges, I just did a tiny bit of dry brushing in black, kind of like a dry brush on the edges, and I quite like that. It reminds me of somewhere that I've been before, but I can't quite remember. But you know, it works. We've got some drying to do. The colours will change as they dry as well, and you know, this is one of those processes that it starts off looking, when you first start, it looks terrible, but as you go, the process kind of helps, and it builds up. And you know, there's been some slight accidents here and there, but as Bob Ross says, the happy little accidents, sort of like round this corner here, some of the grey paints come off, but it doesn't look too dissimilar to like flinty style materials, or when you get that quartzy material in between rocks and that. So it ends up being like a chaotic, haphazard approach to creating natural effects. The only bit that I'm a little bit concerned with, which we might need to detail up, is this back bit here. Looks a bit uniform, but looks a bit clean to it, for it to have been mined out in a kind of traditional medieval approach. And if you from certain angles, especially the lower angles, you can sort of see there's a few little gaps here and there. But we can always go in with that. If needs be, I'll go in with the airbrush and a wash and do a little bit on that. So I'll show you when I've put the dirt bit on. And then it's just going to be a case, I think, for this particular video, you'll see everything when I've done it, essentially. And we'll get it all tarted up, and then the next stage after that, like I said, will be doing the ground and the lake, which will bring us up to what, episode 11, and then episode 12, the final episode, will be adding in the buildings and stuff like that, I think. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with this. As we can now see here, this is pretty much the painting phase done. So if we work from right to left, we've got the iron stone and the light ochre stony colour, which is accidentally made sense of what this area is. This would have been a little mine, I think, in my little head. And then as we kind of go down, we've got the regular stony stone. It's all still wet. I did go in and paint this bit here, but as you can see, some areas didn't quite paint the way I wanted them to paint, and we took off some of the plaster, which has exposed the bare foam, which is not very easy to cover, but that's fine. We can fix that later on. So I've just got to leave it now, let it all dry. I've gone in with the black wash along the kind of into the crevices and stuff like that. We've gone in with a bit of brown, so the rocks have got lots of nice colouring. We've got some sort of irony, dirty colours going on down here, and then obviously down at the bottom here. This is kind of what it's going to look like, hopefully, when it's all dry. The next steps will be to mix up some form of texture paint. I'm probably going to go and get some sand from somewhere. I haven't got much else at the minute. I can get some sand, I've got some PVA brown paint, mix it all together and start making a mud mix that goes up on that side. And then when that's in, well, actually, it'll probably be a case of loose stones PVA'd in when it's dry, in some of the crevices and stuff like that. Then the texture paint and then after the texture paint, we'll go in with some trees and some flocking and some kind of like greenery, just to kind of like make it look a bit more livable, or you know, like there's life. And then the castles can go in. There's a bit of work for where that castle needs to go, or that little castle tower. But yeah, I think it's looking pretty good so far. I'm excited to see when it's dried. I've gone through some of my like tubs of scatter and flock, and I didn't think I had any sand, but I've managed to get some builder's sand that we used to use for filling in parts of the lane and stuff like that. It has a lot of kind of like, it's basically recycledy sort of sand, very rough, got bits of brick in it and stone and all sorts of gunk. But I managed to sieve some sand out, and also bolstered that with some sawdust to make up some texture paint. So I've managed to get basically to where I've wanted to be. Hindsight, I've rushed it a little bit, but I've managed to cover up the areas that I've gone, and I'll talk about those in a minute. So basically we've got mud all the way up this back area here, where some of the paint wasn't covering at all for various different reasons, such as down the back, bits that you're never really going to see. I've basically filled it with the texture mud. So if you do happen to see it from that angle, or at least I know it's kind of covered, I can put some trees in it or whatever. Then we've got coming down this back end here, we've got like a mud slope, and then basically just down the backs, that's all been mudded up. I am going to try this without putting a tunnel mouth on there. I don't think it's going to need it. If I'm 100% honest, because you can't tell, and the viewing angle is pretty much from where we're going to be anyway, so it might just need a little bit of you know, titivation, because most likely we've got this piece of foam board on this side, although that is warping really badly, and putting loads of wet paint on it's probably not going to help the situation. Might need reinforcing with wood. I'm thinking about doing the same on the other side, so it'll be a fully enclosed layout. But they're future problems for future Jack. But yeah, as you can see, we've got mud spattered about. I try and because I've been to a lot of places with kind of like, not cliff mountain faces, although I have been driven through Switzerland across the top of some of the Alps, the Furkapass and stuff like that. It's surprising how green it is in those areas. But you know, the areas that I'm kind of basing it on it from, kind of like childhood and a lot of places I used to go hiking, from a distance it looks very rocky, but when you're actually up close, it's full of dirt. And where I know some people really meticulously try and get rid of, obviously I'm using these as an example, like you see where these little air pockets are in the foam. This is a bad example as regards to, because that bit does look a bit ropey at the minute, but there's lots of those areas dotted around in the foam. I don't know how well they'll show up on camera. I'm pointing at some now. We've got like one little one here and a couple there. You do see stuff like that naturally occurring, because it'll start off as a little imperfection in the rock, and then water will get in, and then over the years it spreads, and then, you know, bits of mud get stuck in there, bits of seed, and usually it's moss and things like that will start growing in it if it's not You know, if it's big enough, and I've seen in little holes before, little saplings start to grow. There used to be we used to call it the elephant rock, a big old chunk of stone on one of the local parks. And that was full of little divots that the rain and water had caused over the years. So it kind of looked like moon rock. And there were loads of little stones like this. And, you know, and because it was under hawthorns, big hawthorn bushes and other trees, you used to get little saplings growing out of it, and bits like that. So to me, this looks not realistic. It's stylized, but it looks relatively realistic. You know, I can relate to it. And then when we get the greenery on, it'll look tickety-boo. And then with the remainder of what I've got left, I didn't want to come all the way out right down here because obviously I need to do some planning in regards to where buildings and stuff like that are going to go. But round the edges of the base of the mountain, I've just started making a little bit of a like, you know, where mud would naturally start to build up as things get kind of eroded away in that. One thing I have found is, like, definitely let the rock, you know, your painted rock, this stuff dry, because it's reacted with the filler, it's reacted with, you know, the plaster and stuff like that, and that is soft as, you know, soft as oat. You know, as soft as poo, basically. Like touching it with the brush and the spatula, which I've applied this in some areas, it took away the bottom coat with the texture. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this so far. I think it's looking all right. You know, eager beaver that I am, I want to get the castle in to see how the castle looks in situ, but we can't do that yet because I'm going to get paint and crud all over the castle. So this is going to get left now. I'm going to have to be very, very, very disciplined and not try and rush on. Let this dry, probably a good day, maybe two. I am going on the 19th, I think it is. I'm going to the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway Gala, so that should be interesting. I think they've got a Merchant Navy going, which I don't think I've ever seen a Merchant Navy running. I've seen one. I've been one to when I was down in Paignton. We went to a couple of railways around there. I saw one on a turntable, which was a runner. I can't remember what it is. I think Broughton's there, and a couple of other engines. So that'll be interesting. So we might pick it up after that. And you know, there's other things that are going on. In the back, there's a Volks, which has got a heli. If we can focus it, there we go. It's got a helicopter and a couple of airfix kits, because I went to the Air Museum in Donny the other day. So that might be the next project. So I'm going to start doing some more planning on that one. But anyway, we're rocking and we're rolling. Hello, welcome back. So as you can see, there's been a tiny bit of a transformation on our little mountain scene, our little mountainside. So the rocks dried enough for me to be able to kind of like move on to the next stages, and we've began flocking and adding a little bit of tufts, trees and all that good stuff, and overall I'm pretty happy with this. Some of the trees, such as this big one growing out the middle of the ruin, it looks a bit bare, it looks a bit plasticky. I could go in and like basically paint the tree and reflock it and stuff like these. These are really old cheap trees that I've had for years, and they've been rattling around in boxes and stuff like that. They've essentially shed a little bit, to say the least. But I don't hate them, and I don't think they look terrible. And this is all stuff that I can come in, you know, when the layout's done, and if it starts to really bug me, you know, start changing and things like that. Couple of bits that I'm not massively happy with. So the castle as it stands at the moment looks, I've done a little bit of dressing on it, put some liching and stuff like that. It doesn't look terrible, it fits, it's decorated inside, but I don't know, it's not quite weathered. And I did a bit of test weathering on another piece of the card, and the problem is if you get it too wet, it basically runs. You know, the print, because essentially it's on printed card, it's on A4 card, and it's from an inkjet printer, so you know, you get it wet, it gets that coffee stain appearance, which is not ideal. So I might have to come in with either some oils, something that's not as wet, or come in with some acrylics at some point and just a little bit of titivation and dry brushing, or weathering powders. Weathering powders always work quite well, but again, that can be a job for another day. Same with the other little tower, although not as bad, because this little tower, this is the ruined tower. This is actually the tower, the original tower that we made on the castle episode. I just cut it up, basically. That needs a little bit of work around the tops. I put some thin down PVA glue on the top of both castles. As you can see, we've got that moss effect growing down, and just sprinkled some flocking on there. I don't know what the flocking is, because it's a mix of two. I got some, and this is going back a long time ago, I got some really bright green, I think it was Javis Scenics. You can see it best on that area there, and I'll put some stills up and stuff like that. I got some really bright green flock years ago. I mean, this is years and years and years ago, but it was too bright. It was too kind of like in your face. And then I had some other flock, I think from it might have been from a Woodland Scenic starter set, or just something I picked up somewhere else. And both the colours weren't, they didn't really apply to much. They didn't have many miles in them, either too bright or too dull. So one day I just chucked them in the same tub and mixed them together, and it made a quite nice flock. Now the colours on this are going to change a little bit because it's still drying, as you can sort of see in this area down here. That's still quite wet. Now in an ideal world I'd love it to keep that colour, because I quite like how it's mushed together, but you know, if it dries, it dries. I can always come in with a bit of an ink or a bit of a wash and thingy it down. All I've done with it is gone over the texture paste bits, such as up this bit, and then gone in sort of like areas like in these little crevices down here. You know, places where moss and grass will grow if it can get purchased. So in the crevices where the mud kind of comes down off the mountains and then into the crevices, and then it sits, and then, you know, grass and moss and stuff like that starts growing. So yeah, I put some little stones in here and there. Again, I think down here is probably the best bet to have a look at what we've done, because there's a bit of everything I've done going on in this area. So if I use my little pipette, because to stick this down, all I did is mix up some PVA with some water, pipetted it on, and then just literally threw it on and sprinkled it on. I put the trees in first, because if you ever look at trees and stuff like that, you will always find around the canopy you get dead grass, especially pine trees, yew trees and stuff like that. Yew trees kill pretty much everything that grows underneath and in its immediate surrounding circle, because I think the sap's poisonous to most stuff. So that's how we've done that. That's how I usually do if I've done like little bases and that. Try to keep it underneath, unless it's a smaller tree, and then, you know, the grass is still alive. The little stones, they're just kind of glued in place. That was just some PVA, and then the stones put into places where I thought stones would be. There was a little crevice in here, like that went in on all sides. So a couple of rocks have kind of fallen in. These are just some little tufts, glue dot tufts. I can't remember what they are. I think they're are they World War Scenics, WW Scenics? Yeah, WW Scenics 1 6mm wild meadow tufts. It's that sort of dry yellowy golden grass that you see growing pretty much everywhere. You know, it's quite tough stuff. And then these are some bits of twig, and they're kind of scattered all around here and there, gluing up, just give this impression of dead trees. One thing I've learnt over the years, especially making diorama bases and that, I think you can see it a bit better up in this area here, if we can get it to focus on this area. So like in this area, like down here, there's quite a few twigs there. Now in a lot of forests, most of the time when the logs and the wood kind of drop, as I've done on that log there, they don't sit on top of the soil for long, especially when they're old and weathered ones. They kind of sit on there, and then stuff falls on top of them, they start to rot, they grow mushrooms on them, they grow fungus on them, they grow a variety of different things, including mosses and stuff like that. So that's kind of blending it in and simulating that. That's, like, to me, I've always found it helps it look a bit more alive. Around the castle area, as I said, this is kind of like our more barren rock face. This is just some liching just stuck in. There was a grate here, you know, that would make sense for some weedy sort of stuff to grow. We've got some down here. There's some dead stuff inside because, you know, stuff grows inside places. I have this problem with brambles in some of the outbuildings I've got. The brambles get in and they shoot across, and then because there's no light in there, they kind of wither and die, and go this pale anemic-y colour and essentially end up like dead wood. And it's quite a quick process, but you know, it's, again, if you look from this end in, you can see in there, and I'll put some stills up, like I said. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just been a case of simulating the tufts and stuff like that. And I found some old blue paint, and painted the back scene just so it's blue for now. As you can see, that's white, that's blue, and I think it's a good sky blue. It's called Atmosphere. It's a Dulux one. If I can get it in frame, it'll focus. Yeah, Dulux Atmosphere. This is, it cost, you got 50p, and it must be years old. I'm probably going back about 8 or 9 years old. I was surprised it was still functionable, if I'm honest. But yeah, that's kind of that. We need to go in and do some more. I might paint some clouds. Again, the back scene, I am thinking of printing something out and having, and you know, especially for down this area, printing something out and sticking it on, or having a go at drawing something myself, or if I ask really nicely, I can get the missus to maybe do me something in watercolour. One, to hide that scene, that seam between the foam cut, and two, because it'll look nicer. And she's really good at painting and stuff like that, but she doesn't actually do all that much of it because she doesn't think she's that good. But yeah, and then I think I did a little bit of trees down there. I'm not doing too much down on this bit because obviously I need to do the rest of the board, and I still need to figure out what buildings are going exactly where. We're probably going to have some sort of a dig going down here, but we could kind of have the archaeology bit in this area on the bottom here. I was going to put a curtain wall down and some stone and some steps and stuff like that. I don't think it needs it, if I'm honest. I think we can leave it up to interpretation. If we set up a little diorama scene there, and you know, I think that'll work nice. So yeah, I'm not calling the top done by any means, any stretch of the imagination. This is not done. There's never any project's never done, but it is definitely close to being done. And I was going to do this as one episode, and then the groundwork as a second episode. But I think what I'll do is I'm going to maybe start the ground, this top bit. So this shelf area, start this bit, because these bits need carving out, and then we'll do the basin where the lakes and the river are in the next episode, because we can probably eke an episode's worth of stuff out of that, and then this is that top bit done, because as I've mentioned a couple of times now, and obviously for this is going to be sort of like between the 10 and 20 minute margin of me talking about, you know, different updates, but days are passing for me and I'm really getting itchy for starting this new project, but I want to get this one finished first. So yeah, I think this episode we're going to do that. What will probably have to happen though is I'm probably going to have to remove the track, because I need to paint underneath the track to be able to, because otherwise I'm going to have like white foam between the sleepers, which will look a little bit stupid. But I've waffled on enough. I'm going to let the top bits dry. I'm tempted. I'm thinking about maybe painting some clouds on, because I can always paint over them if they go wrong. So if I do that, I'll show you that. If not, I'll have forgotten about it. I'm going to let these bits dry, and then I'm going to start doing some more on the bottom. Unfortunately, I've definitely ran out of textured dirt now and anything to make it from, unless I do it with maybe some plaster and brown paint, but that'll just look like brown plaster. So yeah, there's some thinking to do. I might need to do a supply run. I'll not be able to do that probably until Friday now, and it's Tuesday now, but we'll see. We've got trains running again, which is fantastic, because I've been missing having an operational little railway. Because while this was all taped down, obviously there was no trains running. Now this England is running rather fast. That's because the control of this is currently rigged up to, it doesn't really do slow speeds. It does kind of like off and on, basically. It's an old HM, what's it called, a rocket or something like that. It's better in the way that the trains don't make the awful buzzing noises that it was doing on the Hornby controllers, but the speed on it's not thingy. But it was a second-hand controller. It did come as part of a bundle. It needed a new plug. They are very old controllers. But besides that, I'm just having the trains basically run round with a couple of wagons on, just to make sure that we're not derailing. The track itself is basically, I've used some N-gauge size screws to just secure it down. And we've had a derailment. Obviously at some point this has detached from that and we've moved on. But that's fine, this is all part of the testing, and it was running fine until we started rolling. So we'll not put you on the clay, we'll put you on the dry down there for the minute. I think this is more an issue with couplings than it is track. I know there is a slight rise in the track behind the scenes. It goes up in the tiniest dip, which I found on the, is it the Arnold couplings, the N-gauge ones have, which are kind of like that knuckly coupling that go like that. If there's any dividation in the old rail heights, like if there's a little hump, they do disconnect. So I think that's what's happening on these, but it's all fault finding and stuff like that. The main thing is everything runs and it goes round and it's looking good. So as I said, we've secured the track down, but it can be unsecured if needs be. We've got the clay down, which is good. This is slowly but surely drying. Well, actually it's drying quite quick, which is nice. I did this last night. I think I probably stopped at about 2 in the morning because I just got on a roll with it. As you can see down in the bottom corner, I've left this bit clear because the plan is this is going to get sculpted and sloped back, I think. But this now gives me the opportunity to start laying down some plans for some buildings and whatnot. So yeah, we're cracking on. We're doing well. As I said, this is one of the reasons I started claying it now, is because I know after tomorrow I'm at Keith and Worth Valley for their steam gala thing. So we've got plenty of time to just leave it to dry. I'll probably start, I think I did some templates for some marking out of some buildings. Here is going to be kind of like not a station as such, but a staff building with a tower. There's like a communications, the wrong sort of thingy, but obviously this is in the base of the mountain, so we're out of the way. I wanted something that could serve the actual honey, the apiary bit, a staff room for the workers on the railway lines, and this be kind of like part way up, like a halt slash, I don't know what you call it, not a service yard, but do you know, somewhere where basically they have things as a base of operations for the archaeologists, for the workers on the honey line, and for the trains and stuff like that. So, you know, you can drop supplies off, maybe something else comes and picks it up, takes it further up the mountain. They can gather the materials and resources for making the mead in the meadery, and then basically take that down to the brewery, and all that kind of things. So that is what we're basically working with at the minute. And other than the occasional random derailment, which I'm sure I can sort out, I seem to remember there was a combination of wagons and ends that did do this, because I think they're not all quite the same same couplings. But one option would be to do permanent configurations. What do they call them? Conflagrations? I can't remember. So basically a permanent rakes of wagons. Maybe hook and chain them together. But yeah. But that's fine. Like I said, derailments happen. And the other thing is, the scale speed of how fast that England was going round then was pretty epic, to say the least. You know, that was doing 10 to the dozen, which, wagons do work the way loose and stuff like that if you're running fast. So yeah, so I'm gonna leave this to dry a little bit more, probably take some measurements, work out some platforms. Platform wise, it's probably going to be some wooden boards around these areas. So I'm thinking, okay, wooden planks, station building here or maybe further back. The thing what I do when I'm trying to do buildings is I think in layers and think of where you're viewing it from. So if you're viewing it from this angle or lower or straight on, if you have a tall building here, then anything you put down here is going to be obstructed, you know, which can be good in a way because it means you have to have a look around and stuff like that. But it's bad in a way because if, why would you put something really ornate and detailed there if you're just going to hide it? So yeah, so there's some workings outs to be done. This area up here is going to be where our archaeologists live. I think that's going to work nicely for those guys. We might even start thinking about sticking them in soon. And then it's just a case of painting this. When it dries, getting some texture down on it, and then it's the basin, a good old basin. That's going to be fun. That's going to probably involve some liquid pouring water, which I have some. I don't know how old it is and I don't know what the shelf life is on it. I know it's been opened. I'm hoping it should be fine. If not, we'll have to buy some more, but that should look nice when it's done. And a bit more sculpting on the old foamy parts, and then bish bash bosh, we've got a completed layout. And welcome back. So many days have passed since the last recording, and this is kind of the sign off. Essentially what we did is we covered the base in clay. So we got a nice, easy, paintable, relatively level surface, and then painted it brown. So then I've got a dirt base coat for when I put the texture paste on. I've been out and bought some sand, so I can start mixing up some batches of that. That area there, I have left for the minute because that's going to get carved into stone. I'm thinking quite a steep drop down on that bit, and then there's a little seam up there where the boards join together, which I need to fill, but the texture paste will cover that. So the next part will be essentially figuring out what buildings we're going to put on this area here. I know what we're going to I know what I'm going to do for the platforms, which are going to be here, on this area and on this area, and then probably just behind it as well. They're basically going to be a wooden plank platform, and then it's deciding what sort of buildings. Now, originally I was thinking scratch built buildings like we've done with the castles, and that is still an option, such as these two, but they work well as background buildings when they're not centre stage, if you get what I mean. Examine them too closely, you see the shortfalls of them. When they're just sat there in the background, amongst the rocks and the flock and the trees, they kind of blend nicely. A bit like set design, isn't it, really? Your background buildings look like buildings unless you examine them and then they're actually just a front of a building held up with supports. So this is going to be the detailed stuff down here. Now, I've got a couple of buildings I could potentially use. Excuse me. I built the Metcalfe Brewery a while ago, and I actually detailed all the interior. Not that you can see much of it, apart from the guy stood peering out the window. The problem with that is a bit tall, and it does look a little bit awkward. So there's that. We could kind of like put a windmill there. I've got a windmill. I'm just trying to think of buildings that I already have, so we can get this and use up some of the other stuff. Because, you know, as time's gone by, space has changed and stuff like that, I realise I've got a lot of buildings. And, you know, not necessarily, they're not getting used as it stands at the minute. So they're just kind of sat in boxes. They're not really worth selling. There's lots of ideas that they could be used for in future projects, but you know, that's a long way off, and they're not into the immediate kind of project horizon, if you get what I mean. So yeah, we're gonna have a play. I mean, it could just end up being a transfer yard. I do like the idea of the brewery actually being up here. It's like I said, it's whether or not I can make it look like I want it to look, if you get what I mean. But that is probably going to be next episode. Well, it is going to be one of the future episodes, maybe not the next one. Because for now I'm going to sign this one off, because this video hasn't taken long to record, and I haven't recorded much of it, I don't think, but it has been done over a series of days, and I need to get this edited together and uploaded and all that good stuff that I enjoy doing. So yeah, we'll sign it off, we'll leave it there. As ever, thank you for watching, and until next time.